Welcome back to the Microsoft Azure Data Fundamentals course. I'm Krista Santos, your Microsoft Technical Trainer, and today we'll continue exploring various Azure data services and how to effectively use them. In this session, we're going to explore the fundamentals of Azure Storage, which is the backbone of so many cloud solutions. But that's not all. I'm also excited to introduce you to Azure Cosmos DB, which is hands down one of my favorite Azure data solutions. It's a real game changer when it comes to working with globally distributed, high-performance databases. Let's get started. In this session, we're going to explore the fundamentals of Azure Storage, which is the backbone of so many cloud solutions. But that's not all. I'm also excited to introduce you to Azure Cosmos DB, which is hands down one of my favorite Azure data solutions. It's a real game changer when it comes to working with globally distributed, high-performance databases. But before we get to Azure Cosmos DB, let's start with the basics and build a solid understanding of Azure Storage. Now, do you remember what blob stands for from session 1? We know that blob stands for binary large object. And in Azure Blob Storage, we're talking about storing massive amounts of unstructured data or blobs in the cloud. Inside your Azure Storage account, you can create these blobs within containers. Think of containers as handy folders where you can organize related blobs, kind of like how you organize files on your computer's hard drive. Now, what types of blobs can you work with in Azure Blob Storage? Well, there's a few, so let's break it down. First up, we've got block blobs. Imagine them as stacks of blocks, each capable of holding up to 100 megabytes of data. A single block blob can have up to 50,000 blocks, which means it can grow to a whopping 4.7 terabytes. These are perfect for storing large, unchanging files like videos. So if you're uploading cat videos in 4K, no judgment, block blobs are your friend. Next, we have got page blobs. These are organized into fixed-size 512-byte pages and are optimized for random read and write operations. Think of them as your go-to storage for virtual machine disks. If you need to run a virtual machine in Azure, page blobs are ready to store the data efficiently. Then we have append blobs. They are a bit like block blobs, but with one special feature. You can add only to the end. This makes them ideal for scenarios where you're constantly adding new data, like logging. So if you're storing a continuous stream of log files, append blobs are the way to go. Now, storing data is one thing, but often you also need to think about how often and how fast you'll need to access that data. Azure gives you access to 3 access tiers to balance speed and cost. First up, we've got the hot tier. This is the default choice for frequently accessed blobs that need to be super responsive. Think of it as the top-shelf, high-performance option. If you've got a web app serving up images for users, this is where you want your data instantly accessible with minimal delay. Next, we have the cool tier. It's a little slower, but much more cost-effective if you don't need the data as often. For example, if you're generating daily transaction logs that are frequently accessed at first, but less so over time, you can start them in the hot tier and later migrate them to the cool tier when they're not being used as much. It's a perfect way to save costs while keeping your data within reach. And finally, there's the archive tier. This is the lowest cost option available, but it comes with increased latency, so it's best for data you rarely need but must keep safe. Think of it like your long-term storage for historical data. Stuff you do not need now, but you might need for compliance or legal reasons. It's there when you need it, but not taking up extensive resources in the meantime. And if you're anything like me, as soon as you hear about these tiers, you're probably thinking, wouldn't it be great if this could just be automated? Don't worry. You can set up lifecycle management policies to automatically move your blobs from hot to cool and eventually to archive as they age. You can even automate the cleanup process by deleting outdated blobs. Pretty sweet, right? In the end, Azure Blob Storage gives you the flexibility and power you need to efficiently manage your unstructured data, no matter how big or how varied it is. Talking about Azure Blob Storage, another storage account comes to mind, Azure Data Lake Storage. This is a powerful service that's essential for managing and analyzing massive amounts of data in the cloud. If you're working with big data, this is definitely one service you need to know about. But before we dive into Gen 2, let's give a shout out to Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 1. Gen 1 was designed specifically for organizing data in analytical data lakes. Imagine a lake filled with all kinds of data, structured, semi-structured, and unstructured. Gen 1 helps you keep it all organized and accessible for analytics. It was built to be a solid foundation for handling large data sets and making sense of them. Now here's where things get exciting. Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 takes it to a whole new level. It's integrated directly into Azure Storage, bringing together the scalability of Azure Blob Storage and the cost-saving features and storage tiers and the hierarchical file system organization. It's the best of both worlds solution, and it's completely compatible with major analytical systems. So what does this look like in the real world? Let's say you're working with Azure HD Insights, a big data analytics service. With Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, HD Insights can mount the distributed file system hosted on your data lake and seamlessly process massive amounts of data. It's like having a powerful engine ready to drive all your data analysis. Or maybe you're using Azure Databricks, a collaborative analytics platform. Databricks can tap into Data Lake Gen 2 to manage and process large datasets efficiently, making it an indispensable tool for data scientists working with big data. Now I can almost hear you wondering, but how do I create a data lake with Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2? Don't worry, I've got you covered. It all starts by enabling the hierarchical namespace option in an Azure storage account. You can either do this when you're creating a new storage account, or you can upgrade to an existing one to support Data Lake Gen 2. Just remember, the upgrade is one way, so make sure to plan carefully before making that change. Whether you're managing vast data sets or powering cutting-edge analytics, Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 is an invaluable tool. It's built to handle scale and complexity of today's data demands and help you unlock the full potential of your data. Next up, let's talk about Azure Files. And trust me, if you're familiar with traditional network shares, you're going to love this one. At its core, Azure Files mirrors that classic network share concept that you typically find in an on-premises setup. It's all about making files and documents easily accessible to multiple users. But here's the twist. No more hardware, no more maintenance headaches. Seriously, kiss those costs goodbye. Now picture this, you've got users working across different operating systems, Windows, Linux, and even Mac. And you might be thinking, how does that work in the cloud? Well, with Azure Files, it's a breeze. It provides seamless SMB file sharing, so whether your users are on Windows or Linux, they can access files effortlessly, just like they would in a traditional setup. But wait, it gets better. For Linux and Mac users, Azure Files also offers NFS shares, so everyone is covered no matter what platform they're on. Just a heads up, when you're setting up NFS shares, you'll need to use a premium tier storage account and make sure you've got a configured virtual network in place to control access. It's easy to do and it ensures that everything runs smoothly and securely. So whether you're running Windows, Linux, or Mac, Azure Files makes file sharing simple, cost-effective, and reliable. It's all about boosting availability while keeping things hassle-free. Last but definitely not the least, let's talk about Azure Table Storage. Now, when I say rows and columns, you might think, oh, it must be like a relational database, right? Well, not quite. Azure Table Storage is more like your trusty filing cabinet, but with a twist. Each row in Azure Table Storage has a unique key, kind of like each drawer in your filing cabinet. But here's where things get interesting. It's not your typical relational database. There are no relationships, no stored procedures, and none of that complex database structure we talked about earlier. So what's the deal? Well, we're dealing with semi-structured data here, which means that columns can vary from row to row. Imagine your customer info table. One row might have a name, a phone number, and an address, while another row might have totally different columns. No rigid structure. And here's another cool thing, partitions. Think of them like organizing your filing cabinet into categories. Partitions help boost scalability and performance. So when you're searching for your data, you include that partition key, kind of searching within a specific category in your cabinet. This speeds things up and reduces the work your system has to do for reads and writes. Pretty neat, right? Now let's talk about the key system in Azure Table Storage. It's not like your usual DO key. Think of it more like a combination lock. You need two components, the partition key and the row key. The partition key is like your category label, grouping similar files into one folder, and the row key is your unique identifier within that folder, like a file's distinct name. Together, these two, the partition key and the row key, create a unique combination that ensures no two rows in the same partition share the same key. It's like giving each file its very own lock combination to keep things organized and easy to retrieve. I know that's a lot to take in. It's a bit like jumping into the deep end with all of this talk of keys and partitions. But don't worry, instead of just staring at slides, how about we log into the portal and create an Azure storage account together? I'll walk you through how to store data using all these awesome tools step by step. All right, let's jump back into the Azure portal where we're going to do our Azure storage demo. For this, I'm going to click on the Create a Resource button, and I'm going to look for Storage Account. And this time, the first one that we are going to be creating is this one, a storage account. And let's go ahead and hit Create on the storage account. As always, I'm going to first choose the resource group. So in the storage account, we're going to first add it to a resource group, as usual, for this resource. And then we're going to give the storage account a name. Let's call it blob for DP-900. Let's keep this resource in the West Europe region. And select Azure Blob Storage or Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 as the primary service. For the performance, we are going to stick to the standard performance since this is just going to be a demo. But remember, we can use the premium tier for those NFC file shares that we spoke about. For the redundancy, we're going to choose the locally redundant storage. This is because, again, since it's a demo account, we do not want to create backups in other regions or other data centers. Locally redundant will suffice. So let's go to the next page. Now, the most important thing in this second page is going to be the hierarchical namespace. This is actually the feature that gives you an Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 account. If you leave this unchecked, it will give you a Azure Blob Storage account. And if it is checked, it will give you an Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 account. So I'm going to leave this unchecked for now because I want to create a blob storage and click Next. I'm going to keep the public access from all networks so that I can access the storage account. I'm not going to create any private endpoints. For the data protection, I'm going to uncheck all of the recovery options. This is good if you do want to have some recovery for any of these of your data, but for this demo, we're going to leave this unchecked. So let's go to the next page. We're not going to make any changes to the encryption type, keep all the default settings here. And then we're just going to go to review and create the storage account. So we can see all of the configurations we have set here and just hit create. So, all right, here we go. This one didn't take as long as our Azure SQL database, so it's ready. Let's go to the resource. And here we are in our storage account. And this is a brand new storage account, which doesn't have any data yet. So let's look at the different services we have here. So if I zoom in here, you can see I have containers, file shares, queues, and tables. So let's take a look at the containers first. So let's create a new container here. I'm going to name this products. Actually, let's change that and call that data and hit create. This is our first container, and we're going to put our products data inside this data container. So now we're going to move to the storage browser, which gives us the ability to make changes and add data, delete data, or update data into our container. Let's go to the blob containers, and here we can see our data container, which was just created. So let's move into the container, and here let's add a directory. So we're going to call this directory products. But before we create this directory, let's take a look at the virtual directory. This is a virtual directory. A virtual directory does not actually exist in Azure until you paste or upload blobs into it. To paste a blob into a virtual directory, copy the blob before creating the directory. So let's take a look at how this works. I'm going to hit OK. And let's go back to our root container data. And you can see we do not have that directory we just created. That's because it was a virtual directory. All right, let's upload some data. I'm going to browse for some files, and I have some product data available. So I'm going to select my product one file. And in the advanced section, I'm going to say upload to folder and create a new folder called products data. And then hit upload at the bottom. All right. Now you can see we have a directory created, and that's because we do have a blob inside this directory. If this directory was empty, we would not see this directory. But because we have a blob, we see the directory. All right. So let's go back to the containers under data storage. And let's go into the container. Let's go into our... Actually, let's check out the state of our folder here. And we have 3 dots, but if you click on these 3 dots, nothing happens because remember, this is a virtual directory, right? So we cannot have any settings at the directory level because it's a virtual directory. So that's a quick feature that I wanted to show you. So that's a little bit about blob storage. Now let's go back and take a look at how Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 works. For this, we are going to scroll down to this Data Lake Gen 2 upgrade setting available under settings. Just wanted to highlight this, Data Lake Gen 2 upgrade. And And we have 3 steps here. So let's go through them one by one. The first step is to review the account changes before upgrading. So this is going to check if you have any features enabled which need to be disabled or anything like that. You just need to review your account changes and then also agree to these certain features need to be supported. So that's complete. The next step is the validation. So if there are any features that are not supported by ADLS Gen 2, these will be listed here in the validation stage. This can take a little bit of time. All right, there you go. Our validation has succeeded. We did not have any discrepancies, so we can move to the last step, which is upgrade the account. During this upgrade, the storage account will be offline, and the upgrade can take several hours to complete depending on how much data you have in the storage account. And we cannot revert back to a blob account after we have started this upgrade. All right, there we go. We have successfully upgraded our account to Data Lake Storage Gen 2. So let's go back to our containers. Let's take a look if our data container is still there. It looks like it's still there. We have our products data folder still here. And if we go inside this folder, we'll see our JSON files are also still here. There you go. We can see our JSON files. All right, so let's go back to our containers. And if I click these 3 dots, I'm actually supposed to see some options. But before we do that, let's upload some more data in this folder. So I'm going to upload the products2 file, JSON file. So let's do that from the storage browser. Let's go to blob containers, go to data, go to the products data folder and upload the data here. So I'm going to upload my product2 file and just simply click on upload. There you go. I have my product2 JSON file available here. So now let's go to the data storage containers and verify that we have these 2 files in our container. And there you go. I can see these 2 files here. All right, so let's go back into our containers and to the products data folder. And now when I click on the 3 dots, I should see some options here because I have the hierarchical namespace enabled. And now this is in Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. So I can see the properties of this directory. I can see the permissions. I can see the owner who's a super user. I can see the name of the directory. And I can also set ACL properties and also generate SAS tokens. So this is because this is not a virtual directory anymore. This is a real directory that we have created inside our Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2. All right. Next, let's move on to file shares. So I have my file shares available over here under data storage. That's what we're going to look at next. And the first thing we're going to do is create a new file share. So I'm just going to click on the plus new file share button, give a name for our file share. So I'm going to call it files. And let's keep it selected to transaction optimized and go to the next step. Here, I'm going to disable backup because I don't need backup since this is just a demo. And we will review and create our file share. It's simple to create a file share, right? And now to connect this file share, you have a connect button available there. If I click the connect button, I will have 3 different user interfaces that I can connect this file share to. I can connect it to Windows, to Linux, or Mac OS. So I can choose what kind of authentication I want to use. Do I want to use Active Directory or Entra ID or storage account? And Then also I can select which driver I want to link this up to in that Windows account. And then also I can go down and click on Show Script. Show Script, where I will see the script that I will need to run within that Windows machine to connect to this Azure file share. Okay. And with that, you will be able to access the Azure file share from that Windows machine. So we also have an option for Linux and for Mac OS. So that was a little bit on file shares. Let's go to our final service. All right, so let's go to our tables. And here we are going to create a new table. And I'm going to call the table products. Oh, and there was a space there, so I just remove that space and click OK, because we cannot add space to our table names. Here we have our new table called products. And then I'm going to go inside this table from my storage browser again. Select tables, and here I have my table available products. So now I'm going to go inside this table, and I'm going to add an entity. And this entity is going to have one as a partition key, one as a row key, and then I'm going to add a couple of properties. The first one being name, and I'm going to add the name widget. I'm going to add another property, and this one is going to be price. And I'm going to select double for the string, for the type of the data, and put 2.99. And I'm going to insert this entity. So you can see my entity available here. So if I go to my tables and go back into my products, you can see I have one record has been added. Let's go add another entity. And this time I'm going to give partition key to be 1 and row key 2. Name is going to be knickknack. And price is going to be 1.99. And I'm going to add another property here, which is discontinued. And I'm going to have it as type Boolean and give it true or false value, in this case, true. And I'm going to insert this entity. All right, so we have two records. One record has 4 attributes and another one has 5. And you can see the discontinued one is empty for the first record. And it's blank, and we only have a value for the second one. So this is a NoSQL option that we have from within our storage accounts. And with this, we have come to the end of our demo. Thank you, and I'll see you back in the presentation. Now that we've seen Azure Storage in action, let's dive into our next lesson in this session, Azure Cosmos DB. So you might be wondering, what exactly is Azure Cosmos DB, and why are organizations around the globe turning to it for their data storage needs? Well, let's break it down. In the world of database management, traditional relational databases have been the go-to solution for what feels like forever. Don't get me wrong, they're great in a lot of scenarios, but they can feel rigid and sometimes demand a lot when it comes to performance tuning. And in today's world, where data is constantly evolving, that kind of rigidity can be tough to manage. Azure Cosmos DB is part of the NoSQL database family. Unlike relational databases, NoSQL uses different models to store data like documents, graphs, key value stores, and column family stores. But what does that mean for you? In a word, flexibility, and scalability too, without sacrificing performance. One of the coolest features of Azure Cosmos DB is its support for multiple APIs. This means developers can interact with Cosmos DB using programming languages they're already familiar with, no matter how the data is stored behind the scenes. So whether you're working with SQL, MongoDB, Cassandra, or others, Cosmos DB has you covered. This flexibility is a game changer. And let's talk about performance, because that's the cornerstone of any effective database. Azure Cosmos DB uses indexes and partitioning to deliver lightning-fast read and write operations. Plus, it can scale seamlessly to handle massive amounts of data without needing constant migrations or infrastructure overhauls. That means that you can focus on your applications without worrying about whether your database can keep up. But Cosmos DB isn't just about speed and scalability, it's also about global accessibility. You get multi-region writes with just the click of a button. That means you or your organization can add Azure regions wherever they are needed. This global distribution ensures that users across the world can access their data through local replicas, creating a smooth, low-latency experience no matter where they are. Azure Cosmos DB frees your organization from the constraints of traditional databases and opens up a world of possibilities for data storage, management, and accessibility. Now, before we dive into the practical side of things, I want to loop back to those APIs I mentioned earlier. Developers can use their favorite programming languages to work with Cosmos DB regardless of how the data is structured. So let's take a closer look at some of those APIs that Azure Cosmos DB supports. First up, we have Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL. Think of it as your Swiss Army knife for your data. It handles JSON document formats and speaks SQL, making it incredibly versatile for all kinds of data tasks. Whether you need a screwdriver or a can opener, NoSQL's got you covered with its multifunctional capabilities. Next, there's Azure Cosmos DB for MongoDB. This is like your chameleon friend who adapts to every environment. With MongoDB, data is stored in BSON, a binary version of JSON, and you can use MongoDB client libraries to interact with it in Cosmos DB. It seamlessly blends into whatever database environment you need, making data storage and management a breeze. Then we have Azure Cosmos DB for PostgreSQL. This one is like your librarian who keeps everything perfectly categorized and organized. PostgreSQL is a relational database wizard, giving you the structure and organization you need to store data neatly, just like how a librarian knows exactly where every book belongs. Now let's talk about Azure Cosmos DB for Table. Imagine it as your speedy courier service for key value tables. It delivers what you need right when you need it with incredible speed and scalability. It's like having a delivery service that can bring you anything in your massive data warehouse faster than you can imagine. Moving on, we've got Azure Cosmos DB for Apache Cassandra. This one's your carpenter. It builds databases that are custom fit to your needs, with each piece able to look different depending on what you need to store. Just like a carpenter crafting each piece with care, Apache Cassandra handles distributed large-scale data with flexibility and precision. And finally, we step into the world of graphs with Azure Cosmos DB for Apache Gremlin. Think of this as your detective who maps out all the relationships and connections in your data. Whether it's people, places, or things, Gremlin helps you navigate the web of interactions like a detective solving a complex case with a detailed map of clues. Each of these APIs is a specialized tool designed to solve specific problems, whether it's managing documents, organizing relationships, or handling complex tables. Cosmos DB has a right solution to meet your needs. Now let's jump back into the portal one last time today, and I'll show you how to work with these incredible tools within Cosmos DB. All right, so we're back again in the Azure portal, and this time we're going to be creating an Azure Cosmos DB. So let's create a resource and let's look for Azure Cosmos DB. And it's exactly this first one that you see over here, which says Azure Cosmos DB, just to highlight it. And I'm going to hit the Create Cosmos DB, and we'll have a couple of different options here, different APIs that we have with Cosmos DB. So we have the Cosmos DB for NoSQL. This is the one we're going to be using for this demo. We also have Azure Cosmos DB for MongoDB, along with others like Cosmos DB for Table, Cosmos DB for Apache Gremlin, Cosmos DB for Apache Cassandra, and Cosmos DB for PostgreSQL. For this demo, we're going to stick to Azure Cosmos DB for NoSQL. So let's create this. The first thing we're going to do, as usual, is add our resource group. And we're going to create an account name. So we're going to say for this one, it's going to be Cosmos DB for DP-900. And we're going to try to find a region here that works in Europe. So we're going to stick to UK West in this case. So let me just find UK West. There you go, UK West. And I am going to keep this as provisioned throughput. I'm not going to apply the free tier discount, but you can if you want. I'm not going to apply it. And I'm going to go to the next, which is global distribution. I'm going to keep both of these as disabled, but these are really cool features you have for Cosmos DB, which is geo-redundancy and multi-region rights. Super powerful features for Cosmos DB for global distribution. So if you have an application which you're using in multiple regions, having multi-region rights is really, really powerful because it gives you very low latency features there. In the networking tab, we're not going to make any changes here, and we're just going to click review and create. We're not going to make any changes to the rest of the tabs. So validation was successful, and we can create our Cosmos DB account. All right, so we have our resource. Let's go to our resource. And now that we have created Cosmos DB account, the first thing we have to do is create a container. In order to do that, we are going to go to the Data Explorer, which is an option we have right here. So I'm going to just highlight it. Oops, I'm just going to highlight it, the Data Explorer, right here. And in here, we have a little bit of a video that usually shows up. So you can use it to understand what Cosmos DB is. I'm just going to close this. And what we're going to do is we're going to click on this Launch Quick Start to create some a container with some sample data in it. So you can see this is already pre-populated sample DB for my database ID. I have sample container for my container ID. And we also have the partition key, category ID. And I'm not going to make any changes to the default settings here. I'm just going to go click on OK. Just going to give it a minute for it to actually create this container with some data in it. There you go. You can see our sample database and sample container getting created in the background. And there you go. Our sample data container has been created. I'm going to close this view sample data and let's explore this manually. I have my sample DB, which is already opened up. So I close it and open it. You can see this is my sample DB. Within my sample DB, I have a sample container. And within the container, I have my items. And you can see this is one of the items that you have here. I have ID, category names, SKU, name description, price, and tags. Now, these columns that you can see right at the end with the underscore, these are generated by Cosmos DB itself. So this is not columns that or attributes that you are creating and adding to the records. So here, let's create a new item here, just to show you how to create a new item. So I have the new item button there. I'm just going to click it. Just want to show you the new item button. And here we are given an option for populating two attributes, ID and category ID. Why is that? Because when we created the sample DB, we actually gave it category ID as a partition key. All right. I've populated just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 here for ID. And I'm just going to populate another random key here. But this is mandatory because it is a partition key value in your database. So let's create some additional attributes here. So let's give it, for example, a name. And I'm going to call it Road Helmet 45. And I do need to add a comma there. And then let's add another one, which is SKU. And I'm going to put a random SKU number there that I'm just going to create. End with a comma. And then I'm also going to add a description. And I'm going to say this product is called Road Helmet 45, and then end with the last quotes. So you see the backslashes that I've added just before the quotes, the double quotes. That's so that I can recognize those quotes and it doesn't end my string text there. Okay, and that is why I've added that backslash. Okay, the last attribute I'm going to put is the price. This doesn't need any quotes because this is actually text. So I'm just going to put the text right, the numerical value right in here. And that's it. I can add my new record. I'm just going to click on save, and that's going to add my new record. And you can see I've added, these columns were added automatically to my new record without me having to do anything, right? We haven't added this. These fields are going to be super helpful for Power BI to navigate and process the records. Now that we've added a record, let's go and see how to query this in the Data Explorer. So let's go to one of these options in the Data Explorer, right on top, to query the data. So I'm going to go navigate back to the Data Explorer and go into my items. And one of these options on the top are going to be to query, to create a new query, not open a query. There you go. So new SQL query, that's the option. The new SQL query option. Just want to highlight it here because it is difficult to find. And then I have a query already generated for me. So I can already execute this query. I'm just going to put the from C on the next line, and I'm going to add a where clause so that I can find the record that we just generated. So I'm going to say where C name includes the helmet word, and execute the query. So if I see the results of this query, I can scroll down And you can see accessories helmets, and this is the one that we created just now, the Road Helmet 45. So that's the one we just added. So that's how you can see it's super easy to query our Cosmos DB data in this query editor. And with that, we're done with this demo. See you back in the presentation. Wow, that was really something. Cosmos DB always gets me fired up. It's so simple yet so powerful. Now, before we wrap up, let's take a quick moment to recap what we've covered until now. We mainly focused on working with non-relational data like semi-structured and unstructured data, including services like Azure Blob Storage, Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, and Azure Cosmos DB, and how to work with them. This concludes our session. There are many ways to continue your journey. We encourage you to watch other videos in this course or search out your next favorite topic on Microsoft Learn at aka.ms/learn.